I just would like to highlight you some housekeeping rules for today. Please don't forget to keep your microphones on mute during the presentations. Feel free and encouraged to submit questions via Zoom chat. They will be answered at the end of each session. And also please note that we will be recording this event, which later will be available on the CrowdHelix platform. My name is Joana Soares. I will be here with you, and I'm part of the CrowdHelix team. To kick off the event of today, I'm delighted to invite Alessio Oliva Spera, the EU project manager at APRE. He has been working in APRE since 2021, focusing mainly on EU-funded projects. He is currently coordinating the Horizon 2020 project TIME4CS and the higher education projects Blue Rev and Partner. That's it, please.
Thank you, Joanna, and welcome everyone from my side as well. While I start sharing my screen, must say that I'm very happy to be here today. Of course, in principle as TIME4CS coordinator, but also as an AI enthusiast, let's say. So I'm really looking forward to hearing more from our colleagues later on. And you should be able to see my screen now, right? Okay, thank you very much. So yeah, TIME4CS, as said by Joanna, is an H2020 funded project to support sustainable institutional changes in RPOs to promote citizen science as a research methodology. And we have a consortium made of 11 partners across 9 European countries. And we have APRE as coordinator, and we have some very high-profile universities and RPOs across Europe. We have Aarhus University, and some colleagues from Aarhus University are here today, and we'll talk in a minute. University College London, CrowdHelix, of course, which is here as well, and so on, with a very, I must say, very homogeneous distribution across Europe. And basically, as the claim said, what we wanted to achieve with our project was not the, let's say, the classic citizen science project making concrete citizen science activities, but rather operating, let's say, within the institutions, namely the universities, research organizations, and so on, to stimulate long-term institutional changes, which is what we need in the long term to implement citizen science as a research methodology. And we did it for 3 years because the project is about to end in December 2023 with a unique concept paradigm in a certain way, where our partners are mainly divided in front runners and implementers, and there has been during these 3 years a continuous mutual learning scheme in between them. And that's because on one side we have RPOs which are, or at this point, which were at very early stages of implementation of institutional changes to support citizen science. And on the other side, we have front runners, which are those RPOs, including Aarhus University, of course, with a long-lasting experience in the field of citizen science and which can mentor and train the implementers in this sense across the project with, of course, a process of mutual learning shaped along 4 areas of intervention, which we call intervention areas, aimed at developing and implementing customized roadmaps for each of the implementers. So this is more or less like, let's say, the skeleton of our project. So, of course, the main aim is to trigger institutional change, as said, but this is something that you can achieve only in the long term. So we defined 4 areas of intervention, which are research, education and awareness, support resources and infrastructure, and policy and assessment in the end. For each of those areas, we co-defined what we call grounding actions, which are nothing more than concrete actions that the implementers have to implement, and with the support of the front runners to achieve in the end the institutional change. And this is what has guided us during these 3 years. Along with this, we had a long analysis across Europe and across all the world, basically made of around 40 case studies to define and understand what purely is driving citizen science adoption in research performing organizations. And we came out with this definition of 11 fundamental conditions which have to happen and to be real in an institution to achieve our main aim. Always taking into consideration that the institutional transformation is a process, and it is a long process, which can be divided in 3 main phases. And this is what we defined as a typical scheme to be achieved, depending on the different combinations of the 11 conditions that I showed you before. And this is basically the journey, the pathway that our implementers are in the process of developing within their organization. And of course, along the 3 years, we achieved a lot of results. We defined tools and resources like indicators for both individual and institutional changes in support of citizen science, which are in the top left corner in this slide. We have the reflection tool, which is a reusable and interactive tool to define your own grounding action within your institution. We have the Citizen Science Helix hosted by Crowd Helix, and we'll talk about this in a minute, I am sure. And we have trainings, webinars. This webinar will be part of this package as well. So I warmly invite you to visit our website, our resources, and also our Zenodo community, and to get in touch with us for these last 3 months of Time4CS. With that being said, I hope I'm on time, and I thank you very much for the attention. Back to you, Joanna, I guess.
Thank you very much, Alessi. Yes, we're right on time. So now let's welcome Professor Roger Sora, Associate Professor at the Department of Interdisciplinary Studies of Culture in Studies of Technology and Society. Roger is the PI and work package leader for the EU Horizon Europe Research and Innovation Program funded BIAS project. And his research focus on automation, robotization, and the digitalization of society, how humans and technology relate to each other. Roger, I will pass to you.
Great, thank you very much. And thank you for the invitation to this webinar. I'm very happy to be here and present the BIAS project. I saw a request for closed captions, so I will try to keep them up. I find it a test of my English ability, so let's see. But I wanted to start with a question, since we are a fairly new project. So if you think back of when you apply for a job, how can we make sure that the right person really gets the job? Research shows that humans discriminate quite a lot when we are hiring and assessing people for work, for example, based on a person's age, gender, race, class, etc. And now the problem is that also artificial intelligence is being used for recruitment, for example, on finding, screening, and assessing candidates for jobs. So the problems that we want to investigate in BIAS is how can we make sure that AI does not reproduce human bias and discrimination? And also, how can we ensure that AI does not invent new forms of discrimination for job applicants and workers? So those are the big questions we are trying to solve with our project claim that AI used in the labor market needs to be trustworthy and socially responsible. And I want to now tell you about the BIAS project. So this is a research project funded under the European Union's Horizon Europe program under Pillar 2. We are led by us at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology, where I am the PI. It's a 4-year project that started in October last year, and we have 9 partner organizations across all corners of Europe, with about 40 people working quite actively in the project. So this is our consortium map. You can see us here being led by us in Norway, but we also have partners from University of Iceland. We have partners in Portugal, Turkey, Italy, and basically all corners of Europe. And you will also hear more from some of our leads later today from the project. So I'm very happy to see many of the project partners here today. Now, the mission of the BIAS project is that we want to empower the AI and human research management community by addressing and mitigating algorithmic biases. And how do we do that? Well, we focus on an interdisciplinary research and impact methodology, which is based around ethnographic fieldwork, where we interview employers, employees, and AI developers from different European countries that provide information about current experiences and future scenarios where AI is important for a work context. We are also creating national labs in each country where communities of practitioners, employees, human research managers, and AI specialists are coming together to bring forth new knowledge about how we can use AI in a better way. And we are also doing AI research and development with a focus on natural language processing and case-based reasoning. In particular, we are creating a technology called the BIASer, which is our proof of concept technology with models that both identify and mitigate bias and unfairness in decision-making that will be made available to the AI community. Now, some examples of the work that we have already started. So we are, as I said, investigating AI and HR practices with 4 months of fieldwork in selected countries, where we are spending time with companies, organizations that are using or making AI for assessment for hiring and work, where we plan on doing 365 interviews in total. And for the technical side, for our BIASer technology, we are focusing on what job tags tell you about an applicant, because we know that when you try to, for example, anonymize a cover letter or a motivational letter, this is often not enough to debias the application, because there are some patterns that are not visible to humans that might be picked up by AI and lead to bias in decision-making. For example, your hobbies, your family situation, that can be coded by computers to mean something different than what we want in a fair way. Now, I know our technical lead, Professor Krbic-Bricki, will tell us more about the BIASer technology later today. But basically, we want to train the technology away from these assumptions that, for example, the name Anna is more connected to wedding and the word John is more connected to executive, because this is, of course, based on historic data. But we want to make sure that both Anna and John can be as much interested in weddings and executive work as is fairer. And lastly, no, my time is up very soon, but I also want to say that the topic of fairness is very difficult, and it's something we are working a lot with because there are different disciplinary understandings of fairness and different socio-cultural understandings of it, because what is fair for the individual, for a company, for a minority group in society might be different based on where you are and the context. So in our work, we look primarily on procedural fairness, and you will also hear more about citizen engagement from our legal leads, Dr. Rigotti and Associate Professor Foss Villaronga later today. So lastly, I want to encourage you to visit our website, the biasproject.eu, where we focus on awareness raising, capacity building, and laying the ground for the BIASer technology. So I thank you again for inviting us here today, and a special thanks to CrowdHelix, which is our partner in this project. And I look forward to hearing all the other presentations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roger. We can now proceed for our second session of the day, the Crowd Helix platform, citizen science and trustworthy AI helixes for impact acceleration and future collaboration. I'm delighted to introduce Kais Jurgens, Head of Membership Development at Crowd Helix. Kais.
Thanks, Joanna, and thank you, everyone. It's great to be here and having the opportunity to present to you. So my session will last about 10 minutes, and I'll show you what Crowd Helix is, how you can access it, more importantly, how you can access the Helix communities that we have created for trustworthy AI and for citizen science. This is a very, very simple process for those of you who are members of Crowd Helix. It's simple as well for those of you who are not, and I'll show you how you can access and create a personal account for yourselves. I invite anyone interested to visit crowdhelix.com/register. If you are a member of Crowd Helix, you will find your organization in the drop-down menu. If you are not a member of Crowd Helix yet, not to worry, simply type in the name of your organization, make a password and sign in, and you'll have an individual user account just for yourself to explore the communities, to follow along, and even leave comments on relevant posts to you. And I'll touch on more on how you can do that in a moment. So Crowd Helix is an open innovation platform to start. Organizations and individuals profile themselves internally and their expertise and how they can participate in and contribute to open innovation projects. Two of the communities that we have launched within Crowd Helix out of the 50 or so that we have here are focused on citizen science and also on trustworthy AI. This is an outline of every single community. You can see there are a massive amount of areas of interest, everything from health to climate. Today, we're focusing on these two, and I've just clicked on them to filter by these communities. This way, I can see the most recent opportunities to collaborate that have been added in these areas of interest. We'll focus on opportunities to collaborate first, and then I'll also show you how you can follow along the communities, learn more about the projects, and even view some of the key exploitable results that are coming out of these projects. First, I'll provide you a little bit of context on what a post is and how it works. In this case, we have an opportunity that has been added by a university in the Netherlands. This has been posted in the Society, Citizen Science, and Inclusion Helix communities. Every single person on our platform who has made the decision to subscribe to these three communities has already been notified about this opportunity. In this case, it's a cluster 2 call under Horizon Europe with a deadline of February of next year. It's a research and innovation action. They're seeking expertise in these areas of interest: social reproduction, economic inequality, etc. These are expertise tags they have added to their post that make the post more searchable across our platform. For example, care infrastructures. We can search the entire platform for opportunities, organizations with this expertise, groups which are faculties, departments, and laboratories, individual people, and also key exploitable results coming out of projects. Time4CS is nearing the end of its project lifespan, so there will be results to post. In this case, they are leading a work package. They have gone into some more information about the consortium as it stands, maybe the expertise they're offering, in addition to expertise being sought for this opportunity. You can engage with this post by either leaving a comment below, like this individual has, these individuals have. This is open collaboration happening in real time. You could share this opportunity with a colleague if you'd like, and even if they're not on the platform yet, you can send them an invitation to view the opportunity. If you're a member of Crowd Helix, you can send a direct private message through the platform. That's just one example of a post that has been added. In this case as well, on the other side of the coin, we have one posted in the Trustworthy AI Helix, in this case from University College Cork, again seeking collaborators for a cluster 2 call with a deadline of next year. So there are ample opportunities to collaborate in the 2 helixes that we're focusing on today as part of their corresponding projects. I would encourage you to sign in and make a profile and start engaging with these opportunities if they're of interest to you. This is one aspect of the Helix communities on Crowd Helix focused on these 2 projects, facilitating future partnerships in the project's area of interest. If you'd like to take a closer look at the communities themselves, well, we can do that. Let's first focus on citizen science. There's essentially a trifecta to each helix. Opportunities to collaborate. We've already looked at one. Results stemming from projects, in this case, one coming out of Time4CS that has been posted on our platform. The idea here is that potential stakeholders can engage with these results being posted on CrowdHelix, maybe from the aspect of financing, market uptake, IP generation, investment, building future partnerships as well. So I encourage you, as the projects come towards the end of their lifespan, there are things to promote as key exploitable results. CrowdHelix is a place to do that. If we click View Helix, well, then we can see the landing page essentially for the community. Some background, some scope, some information about the key projects, for example, Time4CS, events that we have coming up that are focusing on disseminating and communicating the impact of the projects and future partnerships as well. Here we have essentially the major players that are in this community that are really keen for you to connect with them. You can feature your logo here by clicking join if you want to be seen as a major player in the community. The leading organization, in this case, APRI, and we have mapped over 700 individual researchers from 51 countries to the citizen science helix. So this is the reach of any posting that you do in this community in terms of collaborative partnerships, as well as results. Let's now visit the Trustworthy AI Helix as well. Here it is, a fairly new community compared to the Citizen Science Helix. Again, opportunities to collaborate posted on the platform. Results coming from projects, in this case posted by Bern University of Applied Sciences, the TRL level of 6. This is amazing to see. And then we view the community. As I said, it's a newer community, but we have information about the BIAS project, some background, some scope. Again, the leading organizations in this area of interest on CrowdHelix. We have mapped 157 researchers from 38 countries to this community since we launched the Trustworthy AI Helix, where we're looking forward to seeing more information and more content and more posts coming from those of you on this session today as we build these communities. If you're not a member of CrowdHelix, you can still come to the Helix's page. This is open. You can come to the Trustworthy AI Helix and click join, and you'll be able to access CrowdHelix with a limited individual user account. So you can explore the communities, you can explore the posts. If you're not a member of CrowdHelix, your engagement essentially is limited to leaving a moderated comment on any post on the platform. So moderated as in you can go to the post and register your interest here, and we will approve your comment. CrowdHelix, again, is a place to profile organizations and experts. So to give you an example of this before I sign off in about a minute, here is an example of a university's profile page. For example, the University of Copenhagen. They profile their organization, their ambitions, their track record, keywords related to their expertise as an organization. They can even profile their departments and laboratories and faculties. There's typically one person at the top who is the leader that you could even contact, but the profile itself is open to an unlimited number of users from the entire organization. At the end of the year, it is our ambition to feature your organization here under success. The overall track record of CrowdHelix members in Horizon programs is just over 8.8 billion euros. That's the track record of success of our members in total. However, case studies and success quotes, this is how we essentially profile and quantify success. You can see this coming from large academic institutions, from SMEs, from large corporations. If you achieve an outcome through using CrowdHelix, we would love to hear about it. And I encourage you as well to go and check them out and see what success looks like. I've taken up about 10 minutes of your time, so thank you for allowing me to do so. If you have any questions, please pop them in the chat and hopefully we can get to them at some point. Otherwise, I'm wishing you a good rest of your session.
Thank you, guys. Okay, so now we can go to our next session of the day, in citizen science projects. Please give a very warm welcome to Jacob Scherson. Jacob holds a joint professorship at the Department of Management, Physics and Cognitive Science at Aarhus University. He's also the founder and director of the Center for Hybrid Intelligence and the game-based citizen science platform Science at Home, with more than 300,000 contributors. Jacob, I pass the word to you.
Thank you very much. Yes, so I will start off by saying just a couple of words about the Center for Hybrid Intelligence and how we got there. And so at the center, we combine, for citizen science purposes, we combine natural science games and social science games, and then we sort of look at those through a lens of AI optimization. And so this is where we ask the question how AI and human problem solving can be used for the best purposes. And then I'm going to talk to you about a particular project we have in our Games for Good unit, which is called Creative Visions. Also, I'm not going to talk about our work with companies and AI and generative AI today. But I'm going to talk to you about a sort of a fairly large consortium that we led a couple of years ago to try to map out what AI means and what AI means in the context of citizen science. And sort of the first question was, what are all the different kinds of terms that are out there, ranging from collective intelligence and human computation, there's citizen science, then artificial intelligence and machine computation, along sort of an axis of how many agents is it that you need to have. And of course, we can discuss how many it needs to be in order to be collective, but really showing that there is sort of this overlap between machine computation, which can be anything, and then artificial intelligence, which is something more specific, and then hybrid intelligence, which is something that can arise if you really interconnect humans and machines in their workflows in synergetic ways. And one of the things that we argue for in the work that I'm highlighting here is that citizen science is really uniquely based maybe to probe the human-centered AI and ethically correct AI pathways of the 21st century, because you really need to sort of set not optimization and efficiency as goal number one, but in the citizen science field, we have sort of a dual purpose of saying, well, we of course want to solve a particular challenge, but we also want the contribution to the participants to be large. And so there is a very human-centered value proposition in citizen science. That means that we could actually spearhead these kinds of solutions in that field, and they could be inspiration to the rest of the human-centered field at large. And so what we did was we tried to sort of take a number of different projects and then view them through a computational lens, which really means to say, okay, if we take all of these projects and then we view them as if we were solving them entirely with a machine, which of course is not possible, but just to understand what is the core computational task which is involved, then I think a pretty interesting pattern arose from that. And that was that we could largely basically, this is not necessarily projects that use AI, but if they were to use the AI, we can ask the question, what is the cognitive match then of that task? And there is a set of challenges in the citizen science community that are basically optimization tasks. They are mathematically well-defined, and then it's about trying various different combinations out, and that's we have quantum move, there's folded, Eterna, which really lend themselves to a machine learning branch, which is called reinforcement learning. And then we have sort of another set of citizen science projects, which are more annotation tasks. And this is where there is no full sort of rule for how to evaluate this, and we really need consensus in order to do that. And that's really tapping into supervised learning if we use machine learning as a part of that. And then, interestingly, there's also sort of a third category, which is really broadly speaking, where data has not been acquired yet, but it really requires you to go out and in the real world and acquire new data. And if we think of it in terms of what if a machine was to take over all of those tasks, you really would have to take an intelligence sensor plus robotics in order to do this. And we actually think that classifying these tasks in terms of what a machine would have to do, it can be help and inspiration for which fields to contact, but it will also shed a light on all the things that still cannot be done in the citizen science projects in a purely machine way. So I think it can highlight also the quality of the human contribution even more when we look at it through this lens. Then, of course, this didn't take in generative AI, which is exploding at the moment and is something that can be used throughout many of the different projects. And here's just sort of an example of why what citizen science, let's say, why is it that we are experiencing the generative AI explosion now? And that is because across many different modalities, we have seen the machine being roughly equal to human capabilities in handwriting, speech recognition, image recognition, which really means then that we can do intermodal applications like the ones. And I'll show you for the rest of the time just one example where we are working on trying to harness generative AI for social impact. And it is in a project called Crea Visions, where we have created a game where we can then couple together with various different municipalities in order to allow citizens to use generative AI to create visual images of the future. And this could be either utopian or dystopian images of the future. And so we've gone through 6 different iterations, and I'll just talk you very briefly through sort of transitioning from 2020, which is sort of, let's say, old school AI, to really being able to use the generative AI that we see in the media now. Before I do that, I also want to say that, so basically this is a participatory democracy project, the citizen science, you can say, field of this, but it's also an experiment in understanding creativity at scale. And so we have a creativity research unit in my center, and there we sort of postulate that the reason that we don't really understand creativity as a phenomenon fully is that it takes so much effort to create something that we all will recognize and as a creative product. But using generative AI, we may actually be able to accelerate that product creation process, which means that we are embedding citizens AI into a real world citizen science activity, with also the aim of seeing, okay, what does that mean for creativity that thousands of people are now creating these kinds of products? So with not much effort, but at scale, and that allows us to understand the antecedents of creativity much better. And we have a creativity in the age of generative AI opinion piece coming out in Nature Human Behavior in a couple of weeks. So I will just talk a little bit about this computer-human interactions meets community citizen science, which is sort of the mixture of, you can say, the participatory citizen science, participatory futures citizen science project. And so it's games with a purpose that when we have generative AI, then it becomes what we can call casual creators with a purpose that we can be using for the use of solving a particular example. And so the first one that we launched was together with a UN organization called AI for Good. And there we just had a basic interface where we had a number of different landscape images, and then using these sliders, people could then recombine them feature by feature, style and content, in order to create these images here, which could then be either utopian or dystopian. And then in a new version, we coupled up together with a public climate summit in 21, where we made a competition now where you not only had to create a picture, but you also had to create a title and a poem or statement or something like that. And then the prize winners were some high school students who wrote a pretty emotionally loaded poem about the end of the world and how it's all too late because we didn't react in time. Not so utopian, but really gives a channel to express some of the emotions that are going on. As that, it worked very well. And here you can see, for instance, electricity submitted by a 7th grader and various different submissions that really have a lot of, you can say, poetic inside of it. Then we wanted to try to, with version number 2, we wanted to make it more sort of closely matched to the local conditions. And so we went to Venice, we took lots of pictures of Venice, and then we trained our own AI to create images that were reminiscent of Venice and allowed then in different workshops, in rowing clubs and at schools, to have the local citizens create something that was a statement about the future of Venice, which is very, very sort of controversial because there's all of the tourism, there's all of the climate changes that are happening. And we really saw lots of engagement in terms of really co-creating these kinds of images in Venice. Then we moved on to Paris, where we trained an AI. I'll skip this. But in Paris, we tried to be a little bit more solutions oriented, where we now said you have to identify both a problem and a solution, and you then have to create an image for each one of them. So the idea is to lower the barrier for citizens to be engaging in these larger societal problems and discussions by having something which has a very low barrier of entry for joining. We did that, and here you can see now that for the first time we now started to use the kind of generative AI that you also see in the media, which is transformer based or based on the kind of DALL-E 2 and other technologies that we've seen before. And then finally, the last version that we've done is CreaVisions Aarhus in our home time, where we coupled together with the municipality, and the municipality has already identified 7 wicked problems that they are working with. So now we've instructed all of the volunteers to really focus in on those 7 wicked problems. And then we had lots of city images from the city archives that they could then change by simply testing, saying, okay, add some more smog to this, and then it will add smog to the interface. And you see how the starting image then can become something else along each of the 7 wicked problems. I don't think I have time for the video, but I'll just show you very briefly how you can have an image of one of our art museums, and you can add flooding just simply by writing add flooding, and that can become very, very, I think, personalized. I'll show here where you can say, here we have our museum, our art museum, and then they said, okay, well, how about having public debates at the rooftop of this art house? And we also have global warming and swimming, so they said that here's some humor being used and saying, okay, the streets may be flooded, but at least Aarhus will be better than Copenhagen because it's the world's best swimming city and things like that. So it really allows you now to focus in on, here you can see one of the most traffic corners in Aarhus, which has now been turned into a football game on Sundays. So it allows you to really experiment with. I'll show you just some examples going through, where here are some of the collages coming from each of the schools that we went out to, and also volunteer networks that we engaged with. We have been working when taking these images and using them as exhibition items at various different places, and this will now become a traveling exhibit. And finally, we are then now working with creating a triangle of policymakers, general public, and then scientists, in order to have all of those 3 engaged in the creation of these images of the future and the discussions, and having, for instance, policy debates that start out with the panel members showing the image that they really connect emotionally to, so that there is a bigger connection and a smaller barrier for citizens to be engaging in these kinds of discussions. So that's just an example of our generative AI use in the project. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jacob. We also have a question for you that states, how integration between citizen science and artificial intelligence can support development and empowering community among poor and low socioeconomic groups of population.
Yes.
It's from Shmurov.
And I think that this is really where this generative AI is a blessing that comes now, because creating these kinds of solutions like the ones that we just had, where you can create something fairly powerful, something visual, with generative AI requires much less coding than it did 2 years ago. So 2 years ago, creating a project like that involved a huge development unit that we have, but not everyone has. Whereas now, creating sort of a way to use ChatGPT in order to facilitate this kind of generation and brainstorming and ideas execution is much more at the fingertips of everyone. So you can organize a workshop, and then you can involve these various different forms of generative AI without any coding capabilities necessary. And I think that will transform the way that we can have sort of scientists and researchers meeting the general public and solving these problems across those different fields.
Thank you very much, Jacob. So now it's time for our next session on citizens' engagement on tackling gender and intersectional biases on AI. after which there will be some time again for question and answers. So please don't forget and share with us your questions. In the end of the session, there will be time devoted to them. Please give a very warm welcome to Carlotta Ricotti and Dr. Edward Forsch Viraronga from ELAW, Center for Law and Digital Technologies at Leiden University. Carlotta is a postdoc researcher at ELAW, where she works on the intersection between law, technology, gender, and sexuality. And Edward is an associate professor and director of research at ELAW, an RC laureate, and he investigates the legal and regulatory aspects of robo and AI technologies. I will pass now on to you.
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Thank you for having us. So actually, we had first slide introducing ourselves, but I think we can skip. Actually, thanks. We have more minutes now. But perhaps you could say something about where we come from.
Yeah, exactly. So we're working at the ELAW, which is the Center for Law and Digital Technologies at Leiden University. And although it is not very old, it's 1985. It is one of the oldest centers at this intersection of law and technology in Europe. And it is part of Leiden University, which is the oldest institution in the Netherlands, in which basically we also wanted to share that because of this intersection between citizens and science, we wanted to say that we are located in a building that it used to be the physical department, the physics department, in which Ernst, Lorentz, Bohr, Kamerlingh Onn, and also Albert Einstein at some point in time were together, but now we are doing only law and different aspects. So for today's agenda, what we are going to do is to discuss the citizens' attitudes towards AI applications for recruitment and selection. And what we are going to show is part of the exercises that we have been doing in the project. Carlotta will explain the mapping exercise that we did, in which we surveyed different companies working in this topic, and then also the literature review. And then I will explain very briefly the expert interviews that we have conducted, thanks to the help also of the University of Iceland. And then we will close up with the efforts that the project is doing in trying to capture the workers' attitudes on this topic via survey that we have. So you want to start talking a little bit more on this fairness?
Absolutely. So the mapping exercise is actually the first empirical research we did back in December, January of last year. So in the mapping exercise, we decided to say, okay, we worked on AI application in the labor market. We want to address the diversity bias they embed, but which are these AI applications that people use? So what we did was to open a Google page and pretending to be an average internet user that is doing research. And to make this research a bit more consistent and structured, we developed kind of like a questionnaire that would map the name and the let's say the country of origin of these AI applications, the use and the specificity, so more or less like where, why, and how this technology was designed and used. And then, because the BIAS project focuses on diversity issues, we examine the data protection compliance, fairness mitigation measures, like, for instance, more attention to like gender balance, accommodating the needs of person with disabilities, and so forth. And more or less, like, we mapped around 40 AI applications. We realized that actually we could divide this AI application into two main groups. AI applications that actually are designed to help HR practitioner with the performance of daily tasks. And then like a second group that is specifically designed to address diversity biases. So for instance, to write job vacancy in a gender neutral language. But what we actually also realized is that when you look over the internet, there is a lack of transparency in the sense that job applicants or employees are not aware that an AI application is or could be used. And the other finding we would like to highlight is the fact that most of these AI applications on their website highlight compliance with data protection frameworks. And perhaps it's also because the GDPR is now binding and we are all aware of it, while there is no real emphasis, interest in the risk of diversity biases. So again, perhaps there are mitigation measures in force, but it's not possible to be aware of it while just looking online. So let's say that this was our first task. And then we said, okay, we are scholars. What we are good at, what we are used to is to read. So let's go for a scoping literature review to see what other researchers have found in the design and use of AI applications with special regard to the social construction of fairness and diversity bias. So we actually realized that there is really a growing body of literature on the matter. The reason also being that in the past decade, lots of tasks that used to be done, let's say, analogically, have been digitalized at first, and now they are AI-driven. To make it simple, I think that most of you have a LinkedIn account. Well, LinkedIn is actually driven by algorithms, so it's part of this research. So we focused on many topics. One of them was the definition of fairness, so how scholars and other stakeholders define fairness. And since we are based in the law faculty, we started from the legal field, and we saw that actually Article 5 of the General Data Protection Regulation defines fairness and defines it with reference to other two principles, lawfulness and transparency. But let's say, due to the time constraint, that we can understand fairness as an overarching principle that allow us to prevent asymmetries of powers between the individual and the people that process their personal data, also known as the data controllers. Then we move to another realm, the realm of anti-discrimination law. And here we actually have lots of different possible definition of fairness. In fact, we have what we usually call direct discrimination, meaning that a person is treated less favorably than another is because of personal circumstances, like for instance, gender, or perhaps it seems at first sight that those people are treated in the same way because let's say the underpinning rule is neutral, but the outcome will be different. So we see again that there is a definition of fairness that is still different. Then we have the AI Act. The AI Act is still at the drafting stage, but still we see that Article 4 provide a diverse definition of fairness, and that is closely tied to the idea of equal access, gender equality, the avoidance of discriminatory impacts, and even more interesting is linked to the idea of a number of requirements that should be complied with. So, and this is also linked to another policy documents that is linked to the AI Act, where fairness is not only an ethical principle, but could also be interpreted as a technical requirements, because AI is a technology, and so it's not just a matter of books and writings. But then we ask, okay, this is what like our colleagues, like lawyers say, but what about people that are directly involved in the hiring process? And so we looked at more empirical research, and we actually realized that job applicants tend to define fairness based on two different perspectives. On the one hand, there is the so-called substantive fairness, where there is like kind of like equitable treatment and outcome based on the knowledge, skills, and efforts of the hiring process and the job applicants. And then we have procedural fairness, where actually like the hiring procedures follows certain requirements, such as transparency, such as consistency, such as job related. And then we say, okay, there are job applicants, perhaps they are like the vulnerable party in this relationship, but there are also HR practitioners. And we actually realized that for HR practitioner, fairness corresponds to the greatest benefit to the organization or like the employer, irrespective of any other macro, let's say, consequences on society or other procedural fairness requirements. So in a nutshell, more or less, that those were the main finding. But then we said, okay, this is what other scholars found, what we want to find.
And then part of the project was also to understand what are the experts doing in this case saying. So based on this, we identified several pool of respondents that they might come from small or moderate companies that represent also the current practices on this in this panorama. And the idea that we wanted is to deepen a little bit more on the knowledge that human resources practitioners and AI developers had in this realm. And what we did together with our colleagues in Iceland was to go through semi-structured and anonymized interviews, so that we wanted to provide a platform and a safe space for practitioners and developers to really give their honest opinion about these developments. And what we did is to organize these interviews within the BIAS geographical scope, in which we ensured the gender. And in total, what we did is to gather 71 interviews that come from 7 of the total of 9 countries that we perform, that we form the BIAS project. So what is it that usually they talked about these practitioners in terms of fairness? For the majority of the cases, fairness is mostly seen through the procedural lenses with regard to safety. Most respondents believe that artificial intelligence is used to a small or moderate extent in recruitment, with big companies more likely to invest in this technology. And some concerns about this artificial intelligence is the inability to think like humans, and the need for human oversight to ensure safety. Some of the concerns about transparency relate to the explainability of the AI technology in recruitment and selection, and to what extent these tools are going to be able to provide meaningful information about the operations and the logic involved in the decision-making processes behind this decision. But also like about what are the strategies to mitigate biases that include transparent communication about the AI deployment, and in which moments of the process human is involved, or it is only machine based. Then a recurring part that we saw is also that that the AI applications are perceived as introducing biases, particularly concerning various factors when it comes to ethnicity, nationality, gender, age, and more. And part of this information, it is not being processed currently within the HR practices, but still we identified like the importance of explaining what is the AI role and its potential consequences to these individuals with respect to some potential discrimination that may link back to some of these characteristics, even if it is not processed. And of course, I think that that our results show that there is a very focus on the human oversight about the usage of this tool. The general idea is that there is an advocacy for artificial intelligence to complement rather than to replace humans in recruitment. And there was like a very strong focus on how then within these tools we can use inclusive language and diversity training. What we also see is that the majority of the practitioners that we interviewed, they are very open when it comes to training. And I think that the BIAS project, we're going to be preparing training materials so that we can ensure that the future of HR and AI developers in this field can get the necessary mechanisms in order to integrate diversity into their practices. Just closing up, what we realized, or one of the novelties of the Horizon Europe and BIAS project, is that what we wanted to do it is not only do a mapping exercise and also the literature review. Sometimes scholars are known for being on their own bubbles or their own worlds, but coupled to the expert interviews, what we wanted to do it is to capture the perceptions that workers have on the deployment of these technologies that are likely to affect their future in the workspace. So in here, like on the right corner of the screen, you can access the survey. Basically, as I said, the reason is to really channel something that it is oftentimes being considered as an afterthought, which is only once we know what are the direct impacts or indirect impacts towards the workers. But what we want to do first is to understand these attitudes so that we can actually channel them for policy formation, but also for guideline formation. And how we did the survey is that the whole consortium engaged in a collaborative drafting and also translating process, in which we made available the survey in all the different languages that we currently have at the European Union, so that then we try to facilitate as much as possible the survey takers. And we've been having this survey online for some time now, and we are now finalizing the collection of this responses. So if you have the time to take a picture now of the survey, we would very much appreciate your collaboration and further dissemination among your network. Just if you want to know more about the structure of the survey, like we wanted to know a little bit more in details for main aspects. One that refers to interaction, which is to understand whether the respondent has or not ever interacted with an AI application in the labor market, and if so, how it has worked. And as Carlota said before, like the majority of the people, what we see is that they are surprised to find out that applications like LinkedIn, they may be included into applications of the labor market. So this might be closer to what you may think. what we want to really capture is the experience, no? Like what is it that the workers experience in this interaction with the AI application, and how made that them feel. So whether they were in control of the decisions, whether they felt that they were discriminated, and whether that was positive, or whether they on the contrary feel that this is negative for them. And then following this thought, to really understand how is their general attitude towards the deployment of AI applications into the labor market. And what we are also trying to do, it is also to collect some personal information and ensure that the pool of respondents is diverse and inclusive, but also that we can then further analyze the data provided, so that we can really understand what areas deserve further attention in this respect for the survey. Just to give you some insights of a recent snapshot of some of the responses that we have, just a quick disclaimer that this is still ongoing, and so, but basically, as you can see in here, the majority of respondents said that when asking about their opinion on when could AI applications be defined fair in the labor market, it seems that the majority of the respondents are between when it does not discriminate against one or more people because of their personal characteristics, or when it is possible to explain how the application has made a certain decision. So we see that for now, when it comes to the concept of fairness, that it is being shaped by the perceptions of workers, one may relate to very much the typical concepts that we have for discrimination, but at the same time, we see that transparency and explainability play a really increasing role into determining whether something is fair or not.
So yeah, we had this summary, more or less, again, like highlighting the importance of transparency to ensure fairness in AI-driven HR practices. Of course, transparency is not the only requirement we should aim at, but for sure it's one of the importance. And that diversity biases is not something that arise out of the blue, but they're actually reflection of AI developers and HR practitioners, meaning that, of course, research is important. We will talk about the biaser later, but also events like this one to raise social awareness, educate people is of the most utmost important. And if you like our presentation, or you think that we have friendly and funny faces, you can of course help us with the survey, but you can also register to the national labs that are more or less pools of national stakeholders that allow you to be updated, but also to engage with our activities. And you can register just by going to the biasproject.eu and fill out a super quick form.
So thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Carlota and Edward. Regarding some of the questions, I would like to reinforce that, yes, the slides will be shared with all. And again, also the recording of the session will be available at the CrowdHelix website. So please, if you want and if you have time, just collaborate with this research that is being done. And now we can move on to discuss the citizen science tools and AI. And I'm delighted to introduce Git Kha, postdoctoral research at Aarhus University. Git's experience is interdisciplinary, focusing both on citizen science and practical conservation projects, as well as public engagement, education, and research. Git, it's a pleasure to have you here. I will pass the voice to you.
Thank you very much. So hopefully you can see my screen. Yes, and thank you very much. I am based at Aarhus University. I've been working mainly with and coming from the citizen science field for the past at least 10 years. And before that, before it was called citizen science, and the AI stuff is, of course, coming into citizen science now as it is in pretty much every other aspect of life. And I think it could be a good thing. And I will try to take you and show you a couple of the possibilities that are already being used in citizen science out there. So I am, for some reason, this is not, there we go. So I'm also part of the Time4CS project, but now I'm mainly talking about citizen science in general, rather than specifically in the Time4CS project. So citizen science has been going on for centuries, if you like, and it's the public participation of people in research and in science in general. So it really is very wide. The term itself is about 25 years old, 30 years old. So before that, it was just called volunteering or community science or active participation in research or something else. But it really is used in a lot of different scientific fields. One of the main things is that you don't need a PhD to do it. And anyone can join, so students as well as older people and so on. So it is very inclusive in a way, you could say, but it's not necessarily, we're not very good at always including everyone who could be included. So in terms of AI, now a lot of data is being generated by all of these volunteers, and it's incredible amount of data. So we need to work out how to work with all this data, because we can't do it as researchers, as scientists. It's just too much. So we need some help, and this is kind of where AI also comes in. There was, Jacob already introduced the bottom of these as I thought he might, so that's all good. So I don't need to talk to you about that, but there are a lot of opportunities for artificial intelligence in citizen science. Bayesian neural networks, computer vision models, whatever it's called, natural language processing, and so on and so on. So it's called a lot of different things, just like citizen science can be called a lot of different things. And we need to work out how to identify the best possible ways for these two kind of different but somewhat overlapping areas to collaborate in the best possible way. So just this is kind of a slide overview of citizen science, and then I just added actually as also AI, I think, but the examples are all citizen science projects here. So we are using it in a lot of different ways. Originally, it was used a lot in ecology, for example, in iNaturalist. We're still using it there, and I'll show you a specific example. It's used in a lot of other areas, as well as astronomy, where I will show you the Sooniverse, which some of you might know. If you don't, please do go and explore it, and I'm sure you would hopefully feel like actually going and exploring it after my little talk here. But first of all, we need to decide whether we should actually be using citizen science. And there's a very good choosing and using citizen science publication with a flowchart. And the very first question is, can some or all aspects of the project be virtual tasks completed entirely online? And this is basically what we're talking about today, because crowdsourcing approach to citizen science is one of the obvious ones to use artificial intelligence on. There are a lot of good publications, and also if you don't know too much about citizen science, do have a look at these. iNaturalist is one of the projects out there, or rather it's not a project, it's a platform that can be used for crowdsourcing biodiversity monitoring data. So my background is in ecology, so also that's why this is here. But this is one of the biggest online platforms globally. And basically anyone can download an app called iNaturalist. I would suggest you do it. Even if you have no clue what it is you're looking at, if you see something interesting, you can take a look, you can upload it, and there is image recognition running in the background, and it will come up and have some suggestions. They call it a computer image model. By now, it's actually updated monthly. They started using the model, I think it was 2015. And by now, they have over 28,000 taxa. And if we're looking at it, then 28,000 is not that many if we think about the species, because here you can see 431,000 species have been identified on the platform. So clearly it's not coming from AI, it is a community validation that they have set up. So you can also see that there are a lot of observers. Almost 3 million people have downloaded and are uploading images. And a lot of people are identifiers. So it's really two levels of engagement here. You have the people running around outdoors, taking photos of whatever it is they see, upload it. And then you have the people sitting behind the screens, possibly at home, maybe unable to go outside, but being really good at identifying things. And they will then identify what comes up here. And in that way, it's a two-level thing. And then you also have the artificial intelligence helping people identify immediately what they might see. Of course, it's not foolproof and not everything is included yet, but they are adding more and more on a monthly basis. And then you can also go in and see what you have added. So I saw a dead adder. Unfortunately, it was dead. Uploaded it, and Daniel then went in and went like, yes, that's an adder. And you can see 5 people have then said it's an adder and it's research grade. Some need more verifications of it or people to agree, others need less. I'm guessing the adder people are just continuing to agree, even though it is already research grade. Wild marjoram was another one that I uploaded. One other person agreed with that. It's a reasonably easy species to experience and to work out what is. So it doesn't require a lot of information for it to become research grade. As you can see, it's a global thing. When it is research grade, once a month. This is a project, a specific project on iNaturalist we ran last year on a City Nature Challenge in Luxembourg. City Nature Challenge is a global thing. All cities can sign up. Luxembourg is so small that they just signed up the whole country as a city. But it was really, really good. And it was a good collaboration. We had a lot of people joining for such a small country, at least. So over 1,000 observations, and that actually ended up being about 10% of all observations that were submitted from Luxembourg. So it's a very good motivational factor also later on. So what I was going on to say, Phil, is the Global Biodiversity Information Facility. So from iNaturalist, all these research grade observations go to GBIF. And anyone can go on there. It's free, it's open access for biodiversity data. And it's huge data sets. In 2016, they were saying about half of it might have come from citizen science projects. By now, I think it's a lot more. And it's really impressive how researchers can get all this data through this facility using citizen science. So another very good example started 2012, I believe, was the Galaxy Zoo, or rather a year or two before. There was a PhD student who had loads and loads of images of galaxies. And PhD, 3 years, he started categorizing and classifying and worked out that's going to take me 7 years. In which he didn't have 7 years because he needed to finish in 3 years. So he thought, oh, well, put it online and maybe people can do it in a year or two and then I might be able to finish. 3-4 months later, they were all done. And he managed to finish on time and it was all good. And he was based at Oxford University and they went on to think, this can be used. We can make this a lot bigger. We can use it in a lot of different ways. So that's how the Zooniverse.org platform came about, and it's really people-powered research. 771 million classifications. The universe works. You can't really argue with that. Yes, it does. Over 2.5 million people have been active on that platform. And now they have around 100 projects. There's a turnover, of course, in projects, but they are divided into lots and lots of different areas as well. So do try it out because it is really interesting. It can also be slightly addictive, so be careful. So Galaxy Zoo is actually still running today, which is quite impressive because they keep getting new images and putting them out there. And in this one, they're also using artificial intelligence to identify which galaxies are really challenging. And then they put those out to volunteers to identify what those galaxies are. And then it goes back to the AI, who is then trained on the classification so that the AI gets better and better. So it's doing a lot of the simple galaxies. It can work that out now, but the complex ones and the tricky ones, that still has to have humans in the loop. Another example also from Zooniverse is Gravity Spy, so gravitational waves. And it's a bit of a different one because they used AI to train the volunteers. They worked out that a lot of volunteers were actually not particularly good at what they were asked to do. And so by using AI to train the volunteers, identifying the ones who might not agree with the community and going, oh, they might need training, and then leading them on a path to more training. That way, accuracy really went up from 54% to 90%. So it's really good. And on the really other win-win side, it also increased volunteer retention. So AI can be used for a lot of different things and in a lot of different ways. And we need to realize that, and again, work out how to work with it in the best possible way. Finally, I just want to show the ladder of participation because we are working with humans whenever we're working with artificial intelligence as well. And we need to realize that a lot of people don't know what it is or how to work with it. And we need to get people up this ladder of participation, both in citizen science projects, but also when it's working with AI, because a lot of people might have some resistance going, ooh, AI is involved, I don't want to get involved. So we need to make them comfortable with us using AI in the best possible ways. And I think that was about my time, so thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kit. So we move now to our last session of the day, novel tools for bias identification and mitigation in AI systems, the BIAS. Please give a very warm welcome to Masha Krupix-Bricki, Professor for Data Engineering at the Bern University of Applied Sciences, Switzerland, and co-leader of the research group Applied Machine Learning, a research focus on applying innovative technology to the fields of health and humanities, and on the investigation of fairness questions in natural language processing. Masha, thank you.
Thank you very much for the nice introduction. And I'm happy to be here today to talk about one part of the debiaser, the proof of concept technology from the BIAS project. Bias in AI application has shown to be a really large problem, especially over the last years. More and more cases have been coming out and have made it up to broad public media headlines. This concerns very different types of application, being chatbots, image detection, or as well as structured data. There are lots of challenges when it comes to the detection and mitigation of bias in artificial intelligence. One challenge that we face is that artificial intelligence, or what we actually mean when talking about artificial intelligence being machine learning methodologies, can be applied to many different types of data. So we can have textual data, images, videos, audio traces, as well as structured data. And bias can appear differently and can have very different forms in these different types of data, and those require also different processing methods to detect and mitigate the bias, depending on what technology we are talking about. On the other side, so we have bias on one side, but the definition of fairness on the other side, which was already mentioned in some of the previous talks, that it's actually not so easy to have a general definition of fairness. So when referring to fairness, it depends on the exact context, whether we refer to group or individual fairness, and so on. The biases themselves can then also be of both different types, in the sense that we can have a gender bias, origin bias, age bias, or intersectional bias that include more than one of these categories. So having this really large possibility of different types of bias makes it very challenging. So we are able to measure specific types of bias, whereas it's very hard to basically impossible to say that something is bias-free due to the large number of potential bias that there might be. Additionally, the bias can be introduced or be present at different stages of the process when developing or using such kind of AI technology. Often we see that the bias is already encoded in the data itself, so having historical data that already includes the bias that is then reflected in the model when trained. The bias can also be included in the annotation process. It can be included in the way an application is used, and much more. So all of this makes it very challenging. In the context of the BIAS project, we are developing 3 different proof of concept technologies that are modules of the so-called debiaser, with regard and with a strong focus on AI used in the labor market. We have on one side a part of the work package that is looking at fair recruiting with case-based reasoning. We have another part that is looking at how we can debias and especially also explain text-based recruiting applications. So applications that are automatically processing text, such as motivation letters or CVs. And in the third part, which is the one that we will focus today in the presentation due to the time constraints, is the bias detection and mitigation in word embeddings and language models. So to be able to talk a bit more in detail about this part of the debiaser, I want to introduce you some of the basic concepts of this field. When we talk about word embeddings, we are talking about mathematical vectors. And we need these mathematical vectors because for humans, we usually prefer to use our words in natural language. So for example, in English, we could use words like cat or dog. Whereas at the same time, when we want to process written language automatically by the computer, we need some sort of more structured representation of it. So in the case of word embeddings, mathematical vectors, for example, each having a dimension of 300, and such a vector is representing a specific word. So cat would have a specific word, dog would have another specific vector representing this word. The advantage that we have then is that based on these mathematical relationships between the vectors representing the words, we can have information about how these words relate together. So it means that words with a similar meaning have vectors that are closer together, and closer together being something that we can compute. So in this very simple example here, the intuition behind this is that the words cat or dog would have vectors that are more closely together, since both being domestic animals, as opposed to words like storm and thunder, that would have vectors that are a bit further away, but are, again, the vector of the storm and the vector of thunder are somewhat close together. Based on these properties, we can compute puzzles like man is to king as woman is to X, where when doing this mathematical operation on the vectors of the words of man, woman, and king, we would get a vector that would be the closest vector to the word queen, meaning that we can compute X based on the vector representation of these words. So these relations and this way of being able to compute things with words is very useful for many applications. However, there can also be societal stereotypes that can be computed in a similar way. So doing the same kind of computation, research has shown that we have relations such as man is to a computer programmer as woman is to homemaker, or we have stereotypes with regard to professions. So we have in these word embeddings encoded the societal stereotypes, which could be, for example, that father is to doctor as mother is to nurse. And this, of course, so where it is very useful to have specific relations between words encoded in these word embeddings, we do not want them to be potentially discriminatory in the outcome of the applications that are using this kind of word embeddings. The extent how this bias is actually reproduced in the applications is not fully discovered yet, but we can clearly see that there are these kind of, clearly see that there is a bias in many natural language processing applications. So one typical example is the machine translation, where we have here the English sentence about expert, secretary, nurse, and doctor. And we see that in the German translation, even though in general these words are not gendered in English, however, are translated to gendered words in German. And we see that the expert and the doctor are translated by the male version, whereas the secretary and the nurse are translated by the female version. So this means that the system has to make a decision, since this information is not available in the English sentence, and then goes for these encodings that are learned in the underlying models. So what we have seen so far was with regard to word embeddings, where we have one vector corresponding to one word. However, similar technology is the basis for state-of-the-art language models, where we have the possibility to have to represent the more complex relations between words, and, for example, have typical tasks as sentence completion. So said simplified, these kind of models are calculating the probability of what is the next word in the sentence to actually generate text or complete text. So when we look at the example, Anna goes to the park, spaghetti, or runs, then park will be the most likely next word from these options. Whereas here, this works quite well. This can, again, get quite problematic if we start the sentence with this man works as, or this woman works as. So the answers that we get here will, again, be very, very much representing the stereotypes that were in the very origin, in the large amount of text where this system was trained on. And this is one of the big problems we have with this kind of language models and word embeddings, that they fully reflect the stereotypes we have produced as a society over the years. So the debiaser addresses this problem. So we have seen this image before. So the idea is here in this simplified image where we have the male and female first names, as well as the family words like wedding and the career words such as executive, where we know from research that there are these this is bias with regard to the relationships. And the idea of this component of the debiaser is to identify this bias and then be able to mitigate it, and then to verify that this bias has actually been reduced. As we have seen before, it's very challenging to say that the bias was removed. So that's why we are saying here the bias is reduced. There are currently different methods from research on how this bias mitigation can happen and which is the most efficient way. However, most of the work in the state of the art has a strong focus on English. And in our applied and verified for the European languages. Our previous work has given indication that there are cultural differences in the way that bias is encoded in word embeddings or language models. So we see that some more local or typical stereotypes are encoded in the word embeddings in the corresponding language. Also, there can be differences due to the language properties. So whereas some methods that are applied to English might work well for English, they might not necessarily work well or in the same way for languages that have a different structure in terms of the different linguistic aspects. And we also see that it is very important to involve interdisciplinary stakeholders to really study how these bias or stereotypes from the society are reflected in technology, and that it is something that has to work closely together in an interdisciplinary team. So these are the goals for this component that we are pursuing here in the BIAS project. So I want to thank you very much for your attention, and I'm happy to discuss further now or later. You find here my contact details.
Thank you very much, Mashi. So I would like to, first of all, thank all our attendees and our speakers. So it was our intention to provide you here today a wide spectrum of projects, tools, and also relevant specific dimensions of the artificial intelligence technologies like biases, the gender, so a lot of the idea is here to put a lot of ideas and suggestions that can be inspiring to all of you to join our communities as well, to improve your knowledge and also to improve your connections to both of these fields, the citizen science and the trustworthy AI. So I hope that you have enjoyed our webinar, and I invite you again to join our elixes and to check these two projects there. Last but not the least, after the end of this webinar, you will be also directed to a short survey, and we really would appreciate if you could take a minute to answer it. So from our side, it is really lovely to have you all here, and we hope, of course, to have you on our elixes and the community of our projects. Thank you very much.